family in so many ways, psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually, and spiritually, and so forth. Second of all, Christian women are great because they honor their work and their positions. Again, think about Luke chapter 8. When these women followed Jesus and they served Him out of the abundance of their financial means, out of their private means, they were hospitable and they were generous. A woman's presence in the home provides stability and it provides security. The mom in the home is what pulls the family together, brings the family together, and serving in those roles that God has provided for us. Now, there's also a problem in America today because the daddy's not in the home, or the home's not in the daddy, we'll put it that way. But when we serve in the roles that God has provided for us and that God has designed for us, then we can reach those goals and the plans that God has for us in our own lives when we serve the roles that God has provided for us. And Christian women do that. Christian women also exhibit a remarkable amount of faith. A remarkable amount of faith. Take a look at Mark chapter 7 just a moment. And look at the example of this Syrophoenician woman. When we talk about faith, what about Ruth's faith? Or Esther's faith? The conviction that God is going to provide. Look at this example of the Syrophoenician woman in Mark chapter 7. Beginning in verse 24. Jesus got up and went from there to the region of Tyre, and when he had entered a house, he wanted no one to know of it. He could not escape notice. Now, Tyre was in an area of Palestine that was predominantly inhabited by Gentiles. That's the key. Verse 25, after hearing of him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately came and fell at his feet. This woman was a Gentile. She was not a member of Jesus' people. Remember that Gentiles and Jews didn't really have any dealings with each other, certainly not in a spiritual way. And so this Gentile woman has a daughter who has an unclean spirit, and she comes and she falls at Jesus' feet. Now, this woman was a Gentile of the Syrophoenician race, which incidentally was the same people as the Philistines in the Old Testament. You remember how the Philistines were perennial enemies of God's people in the Old Testament. And she kept asking him over and over again to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he kept saying to her, let the children be satisfied first. That is, the nation of Israel, the Jews. For it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Jesus came to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, he said back in Matthew chapter 10. Jesus wanted to preach to the Jews first. That was his plan. That was his intention. The church was going to be established amongst the Jews because they were God's people and they were to be witnesses to the world around them of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so the Jews were Jesus' target audience. And so he says we've got to give the bread to the Jews, to the children, and not throw it to the dogs. But look at her faith in verse 28. She answered and said to him, yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs. Jesus, can't you just give me the scraps? She says, you might have a treasure chest for the Jews, but just give me a few trinkets. That's all I'm asking. So desirous was she that her daughter be made well. She said, Jesus, just do something to help my daughter and to heal her. Jesus was impressed by her answer in verse 29. He said, because of this answer, go, the demon has gone out of your daughter. Going back home, she found the child lying in bed, and the demon had gone. You see, women have that nature of faith that they don't give up easily. They say, look, you're going to set me back a step, I'm going to come at you twice as hard. Women exhibit a great deal of faith when life knocks them down. And that's the reason why Christian women are so great. Because their faith grows stronger as trials come and go. There's been a number of articles in various magazines within the last couple of months I've noticed about caregiving. Caregiving, taking care of an elderly mom or dad or a spouse. And more often than not, the caregiver is a woman. When life throws something at them, you come back with even stronger faith. Christian women exhibit a great deal of faith when their faith is put on trial. They just keep moving forward. Well, let me take about 10 more minutes and go over these 10 things that I suggest that women can do to contribute to a great church, to make the parish church of Christ even greater. And many of you do these things already. Number one, a woman can help make the church great by leading in keeping unity. There's a great deal of emphasis in the New Testament in the church on love and compassion and unity. And so when women talk about what's going on in the church, you do a lot to help maintain a positive atmosphere. You help maintain an atmosphere of encouragement, an atmosphere of unity. Now, I don't know if women talk more than men or not. I don't know if women get on the phone and talk more than men or not. I can tell you that just about anyone talks on the phone more than I do. But when you get on the phone and you talk, it's either to build up or it's to tear down. And so when women get on the phone and talk about good things, about encouraging things, about positive things, it pulls the church together. And it contributes to the unity of the church. Second of all, certainly, women do a great deal in teaching our children. The Bible school program in this congregation, any congregation, is the greatest evangelistic work that we do. It is an evangelistic work that we do 52 weeks out of the year. And the front lines in this evangelistic work generally are our women, our Bible class teachers. You think about this, nearly everybody in the Bible class up until the adult classes, everybody in the Bible class are all non-Christians. None of them are Christians. And so our Bible school program is evangelistic. And we've got women on the front lines teaching these children what it means to love God and to obey their parents and to serve Jesus Christ. So women do a great job when they teach in the Bible school program. Women do a good work in leading and serving the elderly and the sick. You think of Dorcas in Acts chapter 9, whom the Bible says was full of good deeds and charity. When Peter got there, she had died. When Peter got there, the friends of Dorcas were standing around showing the items of clothing that she had made. They missed her dearly. Why? Because she was a servant. She served from her heart. And so God empowered Peter on that occasion to have the power to raise her from the dead and give her back to her friends so she could keep on serving. Women take the lead in serving the elderly and serving the sick. And I know there's ladies in this congregation who call on some of our elderly and say, can I take you shopping? Will you come here and will you do that? This or that? The ladies can take the lead, and they do take the lead in doing good works for the elderly and for the sick. They also take the lead in visitation, visiting members and visiting non-members. Again, visiting the elderly, visiting the shut-in, sending little items through the mail that can serve as encouragement, poetry or tracts or little notes. We've got ladies in the congregation who do those kind of things. And so you contribute to the good through visitation and through helping others in that way. Leading, of course, and teaching other women. That's what Paul says women are to do, Titus chapter 2, verses 3 through 5. The older women are to teach the younger women. They teach in class and they teach out of class. Helping young women learn how to have a home. Helping women learn how to love their husbands. Does that come naturally? Ladies, does that come naturally to love your husbands? Apparently not, because Paul says older women are to teach the younger women how to love their husbands. Cecil, sometimes we must be hard to love. And so women have to teach their younger women, here's how you love your husbands. You see, love is a choice. Love is always a choice. I choose to love or I choose not to love. And so older women teach the younger women, not just in those areas, but with their knowledge and their experience and their sympathy. I've been there, done that kind of thing. Older women can contribute dramatically to young couples having strong and healthy marriages and relationships. Number 5, women can lead in soul winning. They lead in soul winning. Obviously, Priscilla and Aquila come to mind in Acts chapter 18. 5 times Priscilla and Aquila are mentioned in the Bible, and guess who's mentioned first? All 5 times. The wife. In Acts chapter 18, they hear Apollos preaching. Apollos did not understand the gospel perfectly. They hear him preaching publicly in the synagogue, and they don't correct him publicly, but they take him aside. And they teach Apollos the way of the Lord more accurately. And Priscilla is listed first, which suggests that she took the lead. Again, there are things that we can do here in the congregation and in public worship. There are things we can't do, things we can't do outside there. And so women can teach outside of worship. They can lead in soul winning. Number 6, they can lead in hospitality. Romans chapter 12 and verse 13, the Apostle Paul says that we as Christians are to be given the hospitality. In the United States today, we have been blessed with beautiful homes. We have been blessed with big homes. We have been blessed with luxurious homes. And we need to use those homes to serve God. And women take the lead, obviously, in being hospitable, in using their homes to serve other people. Our women lead in that way. Women lead in having a spiritual life, and having lives that are devoted to God. When the woman in the home leads with a spiritual emphasis, then the chances of our young people growing up to be strong and faithful are that much greater. Ladies, your children, your grandchildren need to see you, need to hear you praying. And especially if you're in a home where the dad says all the prayers at the dinner table. If that's the case, then they need to hear Mama praying at other times in other places. Mamas, your children and grandchildren need to see you reading the Bible. You might read it on your own every day, and that's great. But if they don't see you, then you've lost an opportunity to teach your children through your example. So women lead in spiritual life and having life devoted to God. And then women lead in seeing that visitors to our worship services are warmly received. This congregation has a reputation of being a friendly congregation. When I see visitors come, I see a lot of our women going and giving them a smile, giving them a warm handshake, or giving them a hug, depending on the case or the situation. And that makes our visitors feel welcome. It rings the bells and encourages visitors to come back. And women, you very often take the lead in that. And of course, number 10, women again lead in encouragement. Being faithful and being optimistic, giving the word of encouragement, expressing love and appreciation to others in the congregation, and to the sick and the elderly and the shut-ins and so forth. And certainly we need a lot of encouragement in the world in which we live. Ladies, you take the lead in that. Picking people up when they're down. Well, that's all good things, but I would be amiss if I left it at that. Because there are some limitations that God gives on the role of women in the public worship. 2 verses that we'll look at briefly this morning. Basically, we're just going to read over them, but listen to what Paul says. First of all is in 1 Corinthians chapter 14. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 is where Paul is talking about the use of the miraculous gifts of prophesying and speaking in tongues. Specifically, that these gifts are used for the encouragement or the building up of the church. And Paul is talking here about the public worship of the church. And so he says, as in all the churches of the saints. Now notice Paul says that this rule applies to every church everywhere. Now tonight, this afternoon rather, we're going to answer the question, are women to wear veils in worship from 1 Corinthians chapter 11? And we'll see there in verse 16 where Paul says this does not apply in every church everywhere. Here Paul says this does. The women should keep silent in the churches. Now again, he's used the word church here, or assembly, for the public worship service of the church. Keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission, as the law also says. If there's anything they desire to learn, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. Now, this being silent is not mean total and absolute silence. And let me tell you the exception. Women are to sing. Women are to teach and admonish one another in songs, again, the spiritual songs we talked about last week. And so when Paul here says that women are to be silent in church, he means that women are not to teach when there's men present and exercise authority over the assembly. That's why when we have Bible classes, whether it's Sunday morning or Wednesday night or wherever it is, just like Priscilla and Aquila, women can speak up, they can make comments in class, ask questions or whatever. We have to be careful that we don't say just because we're in this building that women can't do this or that. We have to understand what Paul is talking about. Women are not to teach or exercise authority, and that's the words that he uses in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. He says, women are to learn quietly with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority, notice, over the man. But she is to learn or to remain quiet in the worship service of the church. Now back up in about verse 8 or verse 9, Paul says, I want men to pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands. When he says men there, he uses therefore male. Now there's other